Hey everybody, Coach Dan here with a very special guest. Hello, Galen Rupp.
Hey, how you doing?
I am good. We are here talking about our Bank of America Chicago training in partnership with Nike Chicago and Nike Running. We love having you here. We love your insights, Galen. This is the most critical week of training. I mean, I think you could probably say that, really. A good coach would say that about every week. But this week really matters. This is the week that athletes are looking to go for longest long for the dress rehearsal run, the big one. And as somebody who's won the Chicago Marathon, when you didn't win it, you came in second. So you have a good history there. Have you run it more than twice? There's just two times, right?
No, I've run it three times, I
Three
think.
times. Okay,
Yeah.
it's the third time.
One
One, two,
time I didn't finish, so I guess
okay.
maybe technically I only crossed the finish line twice,
Okay.
but
So Bratton 333 there for W's. Pretty good. Pretty good by
yeah.
standards. Um, so as somebody who's clearly strong and comfortable in Chicago, heading into a dress rehearsal run like this, how do you approach it? What's your thinking going into, like, essentially what would be your last hard long run?
Yeah, I mean, I really want to treat it as similar to a race as possible. I mean, nothing is going to totally replicate everything with race day, but you should be a little bit nervous. I usually am before these big ones, and the closer you can make it to that race day experience, the more it's going to help you. This is the time where you want to, get up like you would before a race, eat what you're going to eat probably before the race, try to get a good night's sleep, but it's a good thing to be a little jittery beforehand, and I think that's totally normal, and probably a sign that this is where you try all these things out, and it's a way where you shouldn't be scared to fail a little bit and push, and training is the reason. Again, I think we talked about it last time, why you want to use it to try to you know troubleshoot different things and work through that, and if it goes great, then that's awesome. That should give you a ton of confidence that, hey, like, I've got everything dialed in. I know what I'm going to do eating wise and what I'm going to do fueling, like, during the run. And it's going to give you a ton of confidence heading into race day. And if it doesn't, that happens too. And it's happened to me plenty of times where I thought, oh, this is going to be a big one, I'm going to knock it out of the park, and I have a really rough long run. And those also serve a big purpose. And I think that it's really important, on those days, that you, first of all, you never give up. I think that's the biggest thing, is it's important to work through those really tough times, because chances are you're going to go through some tough times in the marathon, and really, this is the time where you got to work on that, and you kind of get a do-over. You get a mulligan if things don't go well in this one. So leave it all out on the table. Don't be scared to really go for it. I know some people are always worried about recovery, but you should never be scared to really go for it. Now is the time. You got plenty of time to recover. Nothing you do in this one workout is going to affect your race in Chicago. So you may as well, really put yourself out there. And again, now is the time to try it. Don't be scared to fail, and really get after it.
As it relates to the distance, I think I like how you think about it, to go for it in this. But as it relates to the distance, right? Like you don't run 26 miles in training, right? Ever, or do you?
I come pretty close. Yeah.
Yeah.
Most of the time I would say, like, the longest I ever went pretty hard would be 24, 25 miles. So pretty close. I have gone 30 or above in one go before. I've done that several times in different buildups. Not a lot, but certainly a few. And for my long runs, we tried to really vary it, where sometimes it'll be just, the goal is just to spend a lot of time on your feet. That's what Mike talks about, is like, just get used to being out there for a really long time. Whether that's 2.5 or even 3 hours. Sometimes it's not so much about really killing yourself, but obviously you want to have a pretty good tempo. But there is value, I think, in just being on your feet and being out there for a really, really long time. So that part doesn't really phase you. And then other times, certainly you want to hit it hard and run a little faster and be more conscious of the pace that you're running. And those, I might not go quite as far, but yeah, I mean, I think that I've never been scared to run pretty close to a marathon distance. And again, it's taken me a lot of years and a lot of, like, buildups to get up to that point. The first couple of marathons I did, I wasn't doing that regularly, but it's like anything with training. The more you do it, your body certainly does get more used to it. It's never easy, but I think there's also a callousing, of your mind that comes with just running close to a marathon distance almost every week. So I think that that's also really important.
Yeah, you mentioned in our training system, in our intermediate distance, our intermediate ability range program, we have a time on feet run. That is exactly that, to mimic for athletes running 3:15 or under. We try to get them to run that long, but kind of keep it slow and long time wise. Sometimes they make it 24 miles, 22 miles, but the time is there in the legs. And then our last long run, this one coming up this weekend, I have the intermediates try to make it more spicy. So the goal is 20. And the way that our beginners, they hit their goal this weekend is just hit the 20. And the intermediates, their goal is warm up for 5, run 10 at marathon goal pace, and then the last 5 crank it down if they have it. Crank it down each mile, or just where they can go a little bit stronger and give and hold to really like get that output and feel confident. And I think that sort of 1-2 punch of going long, the time on feet long, and then the race pace and faster over 20 in that big block should inspire some confidence.
Absolutely. And again, I think that the biggest thing you want to accomplish almost is just replicating that feeling of being dead tired and still being able to push. That's the hardest part about training for a marathon, is like, you obviously have to balance recovery and you can't go to the well too much. But when you get these rare opportunities where you're putting together distance and speed, you really want to try to take advantage of it. And in your mind, when I'm doing these, I'm thinking like, this is how I'm going to feel in a marathon. And it never feels easy. I won't even say it never feels easy for me, regardless of where I'm at in my training block. But you start to get past that point where, you stop thinking about everything and you just realize like you kind of hit a high threshold of like pain and discomfort, but you learn that you can keep pushing through it. And this is a great time to practice that. And, I would say just as important as before the run is again, afterwards, really evaluate and be critical on yourself, about how you did with, these are the times where I felt tired. I didn't think I could make it another couple miles, but I ended up holding it pretty well, or maybe I backed off, but this is what I'm going to do differently. You got to take that time to evaluate afterwards and really see what you did right, what you did wrong. And then hopefully the things that you did wrong, you've got plenty of time to correct it and really work on that, for when it comes race day.
Yeah, I like that. I like how you mentioned, sort of the attack within these long runs to really work through that. I talked to a coach a while back who had a quote that stuck with me that was something like, you don't drop a bunch of 212 jelly beans in a bag and pull out a 206 as it relates to running, running your long runs occasionally hard, that you can't, because a lot of literature out there and different coaches and, are reaching all different abilities and people. So there are places where I think it makes sense for an athlete to run long runs slow as you're adapting to or learning to run the marathon. But when you start to really get adept at it and want to push the speed, I think you don't just find it on race day, you got to practice it.
Yeah, I mean, you can't hope that something comes together that you've never done in training. I mean, I just think that that's so unrealistic. And even if people were running intervals trying to get ready for 10K on the track, and they might do a total of 10,000 meters of intervals doing the workout at whatever their goal race pace was. It's like, well, how can you ever expect to string that together when all you're running is that distance, but you have a break after every rep, and you either have to run them faster or you've got to do a ton of them that are a lot more. I mean, that just makes logical sense to me.
Yeah.
And training for the marathon, it's no different. You can't be scared to push. You need to be running at your race pace or faster. Again, you're not going the full 26 miles in this long run. 10 to 15 miles of it is going to be really hard, but now is the time to really push, because you better be doing something harder in training, whether that's faster or longer, to get you ready for a marathon. Otherwise, you're really just hoping for the best instead of falling back and knowing that you're ready based on the work that you've actually done.
Yeah, agreed. When it comes to Chicago, as again, somebody's won the race, when you're training for Chicago, when that's your focus race, Chicago is notoriously flat, which people say can present different challenges where it's, you're not really working different muscle systems. You don't get the hill climbing muscles. You're kind of just like locked in that groove. How do you adapt your training for that if you do? And then what do you do during the race to work with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that even if it's a flat course, I think there's definitely always value in running hills. Hills just get you strong. You have to have pretty good form going up a hill. So I don't think you'll ever regret doing hilly runs. It's not like you have to try to do everything flat. But certainly, you would approach it a little bit differently than a Boston Marathon, where there is a lot of downhill and definitely some uphills as well. And I think that just getting used to that more kind of monotonous mindset, there is nothing that really will break up the course. Obviously you have turns, but I don't really consider that, breaking your rhythm too much. A lot of it is very long straightaways, and just getting used to really dialing into a certain pace. And it almost makes it easy because you don't have to worry too much about changes in cadence. But you should, be a little bit prepared mentally, and hopefully in your training, you're working on that, where it's a long, steady grind in Chicago. There's not really a lot of periods where you can have a lot of, off times or things where you're not thinking, where you have some downhills, and just getting used to that, steady tempo and practicing that a lot in your intervals, and obviously in your long runs too, where you really just lock into a pace and work on holding it, and I think that it maybe seem counterintuitive, but it's a little more challenging mentally almost, because so much of it is monotonous. You're not gearing up for, oh, I got a hill coming up, or now I got a little bit of a downhill, I can relax. It's you're running hard the whole way, which is why I think Chicago can be such a great course to set a PR on, and you can run so fast, is that you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. But definitely, I think in training, if you can, it's not important to really run a ton of hills. You don't have to. If you were running a Boston, I would say you want to run a lot of downhill. You want to run a lot of uphill, and get used to that pounding. But you always want to try to have your training, mimic a little bit what the course is. So having just really steady paces, and practicing really locking in, and just getting comfortable running at the same cadence for a long time is certainly a big thing for Chicago.
So do you, when it comes to the actual race, do you ever purposely change your cadence, or do you practice to lock that in and stay steady there? Or do you like do a couple fast steps do you ever feel like you need to break that groove? Do you ever have that feeling, or do you do anything, or do you have that locked in specialty?
I'm not so much like changes in my cadence are more like to work on surging, or having a big move. But if you're just trying to run strictly for time, obviously the fastest way to do it, the most efficient way, is to run a steady pace the whole way. And so when I say changes in cadence, a lot of times, if I'm getting ready for a hillier course, like the Olympic trials in Atlanta, or in Boston, which was a lot of hills, I made sure that I threw a ton of hills in, even in my daily runs. Especially if I ran on a treadmill, I was always going up and down, at pretty good sized grades. I have a treadmill that can go downhill as well as uphill, and I live in a pretty hilly area in Portland, and made sure that I run that a lot, to get my legs used to going both up and down. So that kind of inherently changes your cadence a little bit without you thinking about it. But yeah, I mean, Chicago, for a course like that's flat and fast, fitness is obviously the biggest thing, and just being able to really grind, and hold a good pace for a long time is the most important.
Love it. All right. What's your as athletes get ready for this weekend's run, you have a mantra that you think about in that in that last hard exercise?
For me, and most of my long runs, it's just about conserving, as much energy, and running as efficiently and relaxed as possible. And sometimes it's easy, especially in the beginning, when you feel pretty good. I can get a little too bouncy almost with your stride, or you just aren't really, you're a little more carefree. But all those little extra movements that you're doing, that little extra bounce, it does cost you a little bit of energy. So the more, for me, it's like just keeping everything really tight into my body. And it's like, how easy can I get to halfway? Because I know it's going to hit me at some point. That's going to get really, really hard. And it's really no different in a marathon. So it's a good way to practice that. So for the first part of the run, I would say, you obviously want to get to pace, you know, when the hard part comes up. But as soon as you're there, you really want to try to turn your mind off as much as possible, and really just work on relaxing and seeing, you know, how efficiently can you get to halfway. And then after that, you know, you have to be prepared to, you know, for a period where it's going to really hurt and you're going to have to push. And it's still a matter of like staying relaxed. You know, when you get tight, everything shortens up and you start like you get more tense. You know, your muscles aren't as long, your stride's usually not as long, and you're not getting enough out of it. So with different exercise and relaxing, I would say the second part of it. But you know, this is why you train, so that when race day comes, you know, you're ready and you're really prepared. So, you know, really concentrating on the second half of that run, when it does get hard. And again, my biggest goal in these is just replicating that feeling of being dead and still being able to push. And you know, you need to remind yourself all the time, like you can make it. You know, you might think you can't, you might think you have too far to go, or maybe you're going a little bit too fast. But you know, break it up into smaller goals. You know, try to just get to the next half mile, the next mile, whatever it is, and just focus on hitting that. You know, what'll come after that, you can't run that distance all in that split second in time that you're thinking about it. So you just have to try to take it mile by mile, half mile by half mile. And you know, again, just really treat it like a race. You know, that's the best advice that I could give, because you know, you're not going to get a mulligan on race day. This one, you know, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't count. So you may as well try everything out right now, and try to replicate that feeling as best you can.
I love that. Spoke to a great athlete ahead of the Chicago Marathon in 2021, and that athlete said, "Be a ghost for the first half."
Yeah,
That was
ghost.
Mr.
That's
Rupp
all it is.
here chatting on
Yeah.
Personal Podiums podcast. If you want a short version, Galen talked about his racing style of exactly what he just said, which was be a ghost the first half, try to disappear as long as you can, and let the race unfold, being present,
Yeah.
and then taking over.
Ain't no marathons won in the first half, so the more you can save for the second, you know. That's
Like
when they're
that.
won or lost, or when you set a PR or when you don't. You know, it's nothing good really happens in the first half. You can only screw it up for later. So
Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
definitely work on, you know, keeping it for later, because it will hit you. I don't care how good you are, what level you're at. You know, it's always going to feel a little bit rough. So you know, you'll never, you know, be mad at yourself for taking it a little bit easier in the first half.
Now, one more thing I want to chat about as it relates to being 3 weeks out is the footwear choice. We've had a conversation like this before, and you provided insight that I cite all the time in talks about marathon footwear. You know, you've been a part of Nike for a long time in the development and evolution of racing flats as into what they are now in the super shoe era. And I had asked you, I'll ask you now, which shoe you love to race the marathon in, and why relative to the other option.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an Alphafly person for sure. You know, I'm a big believer in that. You know, the science behind it. You know, I think there's definitely a little bit more bounce you get from it. But you know, it's important to do what's comfortable for you. You know, my running style might be a little different than somebody else's, but the Alphafly for me has been my shoe of choice. You know, and even for a lot of these long runs, you know, whether I'm doing hard or easy, especially if I'm going to be out on concrete for a good amount of time, I'll always go with the Alphafly. You know, I think that aside from the performance part, you know, the cushioning of it, it really does help save your legs, I believe, for the later stages of a marathon. And you know, it gives me a little bit more cushion than even the Vaporflies, or the next percents, I guess, is what they are now. So that's usually my go-to. You know, I think sometimes the half, it can be a little bit more of a toss-up between you know, the next percents or the Alphafly. But for a marathon, I'm always rolling with the Alphaflies.
Yeah, and that conversation in last Chicago, we were chatting with Marielle too, and I remember you guys saying how the Alphafly doesn't necessarily feel fast because you don't get the pop and return that you get out of the Vaporfly Next Percent. It feels a little squishier,
Mm-hmm.
but that it's just a feeling. So I think there's something for athletes who are in the market to understand the difference, you know, in the true marathon shoe that is the Alphafly versus the poppy feeling of the Vaporfly Next Percent. And that's not to say that 4% is not enough. And if that feels great, you know, go for it. Absolutely, lots of athletes racing that marathon shoe. But I've found in the retail context that people gravitate toward the Vaporfly. But having the insight from you guys at the front of the pack who are getting both and can really test both, and really hone in the footwear in a way that somebody who has to buy one pair and choose on the spot, you guys get a little bit of a better insight. So I really appreciated that. I know it's helped some of our marathoners sort of make that decision as to which shoe to get.
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing that I would add to that is like it's I understand like the perceptually, especially when you're fresh and you're in a running store and you try on a pair and, you know, maybe do a few strides or hop on a treadmill for a little bit. But I think a big difference shows up too, you know, when you're 17, 18, 20 miles into a run, you know, that bouncy feeling or that perception of it, you kind of want that at the end, you know, when your legs are start feeling really dead. You know, as long as you're putting stuff into the ground, that's where I think the Alphafly starts to separate itself from the Vaporfly, in my opinion. But again, you know, it's hard to replicate. I'm lucky I get shoes a lot where I get to try them out on all my different long runs. But yeah, if you're able to, you know, again, treat this like a race, this last big long run, you know, wear the shoes that you're going to race in, you know, especially with, you know, if you get blisters or, you know, I put Vaseline on my feet a lot of times. And, you know, again, all these little things, these little details, you want to try to replicate everything as close as you can to what you're going to do on race day.
When you you know, you obviously love and trust your Alphaflies. The pair that you race in, is that a fresh pair that morning? You know, do you wear like absolutely fresh shoes? You know, once you know and trust a shoe, I think it's, you know, it's up to the athlete. Or do you like to get a few miles in? How do you treat your race shoes personally?
I've definitely run in a lot that were totally fresh. Like never, first time I put them on was at the starting line. You know, a lot of times I might do just a few strides in them. You know, like 600 meters worth of work, I would say, the day before. But I generally do like to have a real fresh pair. You know, when I go to race, especially just the way I run. You know, I hit the ground pretty hard, so you know, there definitely is. They deteriorate maybe a little bit quicker. So I like to keep them pretty fresh when I go to race for sure.
You got some power going through there.
A little bit.
So thanks, Galen. I think these are really incredible insights for our team to take into the longest run. Really appreciate you being a part of the journey here. And hopefully we'll see you around on race weekend.
Definitely.
Thanks, Galen.
All right. Good luck, everybody.